Welcome to our training on preventing all forms of harassment in the workplace and learning to be tolerant and respectful of other team members even when they're different from you. Each of us are responsible to help create a work environment free of harassment by knowing what causes harassment, making sure that we're not causing harassment for others, reporting any harassment that occurs to us or other team members, and simply being respectful to everyone regardless of any differences. I'll help you understand what harassment is, how to respond, make sure you're aware of what harassment might look like, a reporting process, and overall how to create a respectful work environment. Well, it seems like almost every day we hear of someone being accused of sexual harassment, especially in the movie star and political world. I, for one, am happy to see more awareness to this serious problem. Today's workforce is much different than it was for many of our parents. There are more differences in the workplace now, like more workers who are female, more single parents, more people from other countries, different nationalities, different color, different religious groups, just lots of differences. There are also differences in each of us. All these listed differences of individuals can lead to conflict and challenges if we don't learn to be tolerant of others who are different from us. Colors of skin, national origin, marital status, education, values, priorities differences, age and gender, religious beliefs, political views, sexual preference, hairstyle, length, clothing preferences, tattoo, body, sports teams, disabilities. The list goes on and on. Well, each of us see the world through our own perception or frame of reference, if you will. Now think of it like a filter. The way you see the world goes through your perception filter, telling you what you think is right or wrong. Our perception was created based on our life's experiences, parents, teachers, all forming how we see the world. Now, sometimes this leads to prejudice and bias towards others, where we have strong feelings about things like someone's religious beliefs or political beliefs or sexual preference. Some of these things might cause strong feelings in each of us. My hope is that you will begin to see the world with a wider lens and be more accepting of the differences in others as we go through our training today. Well, when we work with people who are different from us, it's easy for attitudes, bias, and prejudice to get in the way, potentially creating conflicts or challenges in our work environment. It's our choice that each of us makes, where we either choose to be accepting and respectful to others even when they're different from us, or we perhaps choose to complain, talk behind their backs, tease them, call them names, get into negative conflicts, argue, threaten, fight, or attack. How do you respond when you're faced or confronted with people who are different from you or have different views? Do you find it hard to accept them? Well, the biggest form of disrespect or way to respond to differences is harassment. Now, before we walk through what harassment is, I'd like you to think about a time where in your life you felt humiliated, embarrassed, demeaned, anxious, or afraid. For some of us, it may have been when you were a child. For others, it was last week. Now think about how you felt, how horrible it was. Well, when I was a kid in elementary school, I had a bully that made it his mission to make my life miserable. And every day, I worried if I would see him on the playground, as I'd be sitting on the bus, anxiously wondering if he was out there. And there were many days where he would harass and embarrass me and tease me. Well, people who feel harassed feel this way every day at work. So if harassment is going on in your workplace, they feel this every day. Now, can you imagine coming to work every day feeling afraid, anxious, or humiliated? Most of us spend more awake hours with people at work than we do our own families. Well, how would you define harassment? Harassment takes a lot of definitions. It's unwanted, persistent behaviors that usually are intimidating, tormenting, annoying, troubling, offensive, threatening, disturbing, and humiliating. Harassment is conduct that's directed at a person, causing substantial emotional distress, and serves no legitimate business purpose. Harassment can be verbal, visual, and physical. Let's go through some examples. So here's verbal harassment examples. Sexual flirtation or sexual comments, derogatory jokes, name calling, kidding or teasing. We all like to have fun at work. Just make sure your fun is not at the expense of someone else. If you like to kid or tease, it's probably a good idea to talk to that person and make sure that they're okay with it. Make sure that if you're if you're going to tell jokes, make sure that your jokes are appropriate jokes. Don't tell a joke based on someone's age, religion, color of skin, or national origin, or jokes about sex. All of those things are risky type behaviors. As a general rule, less is better in terms of the jokes and the teasing. What about obscene language? There's some swear words that are offensive and can contribute to a hostile environment, like F-bombs, or taking someone's deity in vain. Anyone that talks about sex or body parts, it's also not acceptable in the workplace. And also keep in mind, comments about gender, race, religion, age, discussions of sex are all risky topics at work and better left out of the workplace. What are some of the visual examples of harassment? We all have something that we view as attractive. Now, there's a difference of casually noticing that person walking by with a brief look versus a long stare or leering at someone. Maybe even someone making catcalls. Woo, hey, baby. Well, do you give eye-to-eye contact when you're talking to others? Or do you give eye-to-breast contact or eye-to-other body part contact, perhaps undressing them with your eyes? Are you seeing others as people or sex objects? You may be creating harassment just by how you look at someone. There are other obvious forms of visual harassment as well, such as sexually oriented posters or pornography that someone pulls up on their computer or handheld device. I assisted with an investigation one time for someone who was looking at pornographic images on his own handheld device. He was on his break out in the parking lot. He thought he was okay, thought it was safe. But someone else walked by and saw him looking at it and was very offended and was exposed to something they didn't want to see. He was guilty of harassment. Well, there are several forms of physical contact that could be harassing as well. Assault, offensive touching, patting, pinching, striking, or blocking movement. All of these things are forms of harassment. In fact, if someone touches someone's private body parts, that's assault and battery. Not only would they likely lose their job, they would also likely be arrested. So what about something like rubbing someone's shoulders? Is it okay to just walk up and touch someone's shoulders and put your arm on them or start rubbing their neck? No, that's not okay. That would be an example of crossing the line. But if you could obtain mutual agreement on it, so if someone wanted, maybe they had a stiff neck and they said, hey, can you please rub my neck? That's an example where that would be okay once you both have mutual agreement. Same thing with hugging. A lot of us enjoy a good hug. I had someone in my office one day that shared a story. She had some tears. I felt like she needed a hug. I asked her if it was okay if I gave her a hug. And when I gave her a hug, I gave her a polite hug where we kind of went side to side with the hug as opposed to chest or pulling her in tight, which is more of a polite way to do a hug. But again, we had mutual agreement in order for the hug. So nothing wrong with hugging. High fives, handshakes, all of those are always welcome, but just be careful with a hugging and that sort of thing. All right, well, threats and bullying or demands for sex are also harassing and threatening. If you're threatening to beat someone up or requiring sexual favors, have any of you heard of? There's a lot of you see a lot of these kinds of problems like Harvey Weinstein was as an example where he was threatening. He would have some of the models that if they would sleep with him, that he would get them into some sort of agreement on a movie or something. That's an example of a quid pro quo type sexual harassment. We're going to go into that next here. Now, before I go into the different forms of sexual harassment, let's talk briefly about what's not harassment. Certainly if someone has mutual consent, such as the examples we just gave. So if someone wants, for a hug or a neck rub and there's mutual consent, or maybe two individuals that have agreed that they're going to date, and there's mutual consent of the flirting that might go on with them, that might be okay. But there's sometimes some confusion as what's not harassment. I've had employees claim harassment when their supervisor is trying to hold them accountable to meet certain performance expectations. Maybe the supervisor got upset about something. And that's not harassment. So if they're enforcing policies, work assignments, performance appraisals, debating or critiquing ideas, perhaps someone gets mad or raises their voice, or they're just bothered by someone else. Again, those are all forms that are not harassment. All right, I mentioned there's two types of sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is a form of discrimination, is unlawful with federal and state law. Now, sexual harassment includes harassment on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, self-identified or perceived sex, gender expression, gender identity, and the status of being transgender. Now, it includes unwelcome conduct, either of a sexual nature, which is directed at the individual because that individual's sex that interferes with their work, or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Now, there are two forms of sexual harassment. Quid pro quo, this for that type harassment, and that was the example I just gave with the Harvey Weinstein. In this case, someone in authority is requesting or requiring sexual favors in exchange for something like a job or a pay raise, or someone pressuring someone into sexual favors. We don't see this too much of this type of harassment in the marketplace, in the business world, as much so as it was in some of the political and movie star world. We do, however, still see other forms of harassment, such as the hostile work environment harassment. With a hostile work environment, this is the kind of harassment where it's taking a number of things into consideration, such as the things we talked about already, which are visual, verbal, and physical, of a sexual nature. So if there's a lot of that kind of thing that's allowed in the workplace, that's sufficiently severe and pervasive, it does create this hostile environment. And we still see that kind of thing, which is a lot of reason why we have to keep doing these trainings, so that we're all aware of where we walk those lines. So comments or conduct based on sex that unreasonably interferes with an employee's work performance, creates this intimidating, hostile environment. It's a combination of that visual, physical, and verbal harassment that we previously talked about that creates a hostile environment. Well, we've talked a lot about all the forms of harassment, and a true test of whether something is appropriate for work or not is to ask yourself, would I say or do this if my spouse, mother, or child were here? How about if your manager or the CFO or someone from Human Resources were there, or the CEO? If the answer is no, you probably should leave it out of the workplace. Well, who could commit harassment? Harassment can come from managers, employees, contractors, vendors, guests. Anyone can commit harassment. We all need to be vigilant in helping to create an environment free from this negative, unwanted behavior, even with vendors and guests in your workplace. So if you're experiencing harassment, even from a vendor or contractor, please let them know this is unacceptable, and get help from your supervisor or anyone in Human Resources if needed. Who's the victim? Now, the victim of harassment can be anyone affected by the conduct, not just the individual that it was directed at. Sometimes someone telling a story can be harassing people around the corner who overhear them. All right, where can workplace sexual harassment occur? Harassment can occur just about anywhere where someone's fulfilling their work responsibilities, in the field, at an employer-sponsored event, training, conferences, in public, parties, employee interactions during non-work hours, such as at a hotel while traveling together. Maybe they're meeting at a bar after work or something. It can happen there too. Locations off-site, off-hour activities can be considered an extension of that. Employees could be the target of sexual harassment through calls, texts, emails, social media. So harassing behavior that in any way affects the work environment is rightfully the concern of management and each of us. Okay, harassing a person because that person does not conform to gender stereotypes is sexual harassment as well. Harassment because someone is performing a job that is usually or was previously performed mostly by persons of a different sex is another form of sex discrimination. Well, ask yourself, could you be contributing to a potentially harassing environment by your actions or words? Do you need to be more accepting of people who are different from you? Well, any harassment, whether based on gender, race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, disability, or other characteristic protected by law, is strictly prohibited from your organization. All forms of sexual harassment, strictly prohibited. Any employee who engages in harassment or sex harassment can expect disciplinary action up to and including immediate termination, depending on the circumstances. So what do you do if you see or experience harassment? Well, if you're comfortable, feel free to confront and discuss it with the person that's harassing or the situation. If someone's asked you out multiple times and you're not interested, it's okay to let them know. Stop asking me out, I'm not interested. If you hear an inappropriate joke, let someone know. Please don't say those kinds of jokes to me. You see an inappropriate picture or someone's showing you something, let them know that's contrary to the company's policy. We can all be vigilant in helping each other with this. Now, you are encouraged to report harassment at any time to your human resources department or your manager. So certainly feel free to go to your manager, human resources, or anyone in senior management at any time. And you can also, we want to make sure that you understand that anyone who reports harassment or is part of an investigation or witness, that we will make sure there is no retaliation against these individuals whatsoever. They will not be treated differently by the company or by other employees. All reported violations will be fairly investigated with prompt remedial action. Now ask yourself, is it harassment if the alleged harasser had good intentions? This is Joe. He's a friendly, well-meaning man who's just very touchy-feely. He hugs everyone he sees. He loves to run up, put his arm around on women and their shoulders. He'll grab their neck and say, "Hey, how are you?" Could he be guilty of harassment? Yes, he could. Because it doesn't matter whether someone intended to harass or not. It's the behavior and the impact that they're having on others that makes something harassment or not. Is it okay to date work coworkers? Yeah, the company doesn't try to regulate your dating. However, be careful if the interest is not mutual, agreed upon. So if someone's asked someone out and they're not interested and they say no, please accept that as no. Don't continue to flirt with them or bring them flowers or try to win them over. The same is true if you're dating somebody and then they break up. Continue to be respectful of each other and make sure there's always a mutual agreement if dating does occur. All right, well, let's just to summarize our training today. Your company's long been committed to ensuring that all individuals have an equal opportunity to enjoy a fair, safe, and productive work environment. And the laws and policies help ensure that a diverse group is respected and that everyone can enjoy the privileges of working here in a respectful fashion. Preventing all forms of harassment, including sexual harassment, is critical to our continued success. Sexual harassment in any form of harassment will not be tolerated. This means any harassing behavior will be investigated with prompt remedial action taken where appropriate. Corrective action will be taken up to and including termination of employment, depending on the circumstances. Now, this interactive training helps you better understand what is considered harassment. You share the responsibility to prevent the companies to follow the company's harassment policy and to help eliminate and report all forms of harassment. Okay, in completing this training today, you agree to the following. In order to provide employees with a working condition free from intimidation, hostility, or other offensive conduct, We strictly prohibit harassment by employees, vendors, and customers to any person. Any harassment, whether based on sex, gender, race, color, ancestry, religion, national origin, age, disability, or other characteristics protected by law, are strictly prohibited. All forms of sexual harassment are prohibited. All employees have a personal responsibility to keep the workplace free of such harassment and to create a positive environment. By signing below and by taking this training today, employees agree as a condition of employment to comply with the organization's anti-harassment policy and to avoid the potentially risky conduct explained below by example. Verbal conduct, such as suggestive comments, repeated sexual flirtation, derogatory jokes, name-calling, innuendos, demeaning slurs, unwanted kidding or teasing, foul or obscene language, gender-based comments, comments of a disability, related comments or discussions of a sexual nature. Visual conduct, such as leering, gestures, viewing of derogatory or sexually oriented materials at work. Physical conduct, such as assault, offensive touching, patting, poking, pinching, bumping, pushing, certainly punching, unwanted hugging, blocking of normal movement, hitting or interfering with work. Threats or demands, such as threatening others with physical or verbal abuse or requiring sexual favors. I understand that violation of this harassment policy will lead to corrective action, which may include termination of employment. I agree to treat others respectfully and to report any harassment or disrespectful behavior. Each of us share the responsibility for creating an atmosphere of mutual respect. Look for the good in others. Be accepting of people who are different than you. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Resolve differences in a positive win-win fashion. Trust other people and be trustworthy yourself. Avoid negative speaking of others or backbiting and look for the good in each other's. Find ways to help others out. Now, these are simple actions that can create a great place to work. Here's a couple of other things to create a positive environment. Be positive with your interactions. Support each other. Be respectful and demonstrate good teamwork. Be respectful with your interactions and communications, like avoiding backbiting, gossiping, or speaking negatively about others. Treat others like you would like to be treated. Be accepting of people who are different from you and resolving problems and complaints or differences of opinion in a positive fashion directly with the person. All right, if you have any questions, please contact anyone in Human Resources or talk with your supervisor. This completes our employee training on preventing harassment. Now, if you are a manager, supervisor, or team lead, please continue on with this training now to learn about your role as a leader in the organization. Otherwise, for all other employees, you can stop the training at this point. For supervisors and leaders, please continue. As leaders and supervisors of the organization, you play a critical role in preventing harassment in the workplace. Keep in mind what you say and do can create risk to the organization. First, you should know that you're held to a higher standard by employees. So please be the example. Make sure you're being respectful to others and never walk the lines of doing harassing type behaviors, because what you do will be copied by others in the workplace and could potentially completely undermine the company's harassment policy and all the training that we've done with this as well. Because what you do will be copied and done by others. Set a tone of mutual respect and common courtesy. Make sure that you're always speaking positively about other individuals. Never complain negatively about another employee or another supervisor, company policy, or anything of that nature, sideways or down. Certainly you're welcome to give feedback to senior management and your manager and anyone in Human Resources, or if you have complaints, they want to hear them. But never be the one that's complaining for upward or down. And create rapport with employees so they're comfortable coming to you. Keep in mind this will also help you when you have to give them feedback or to want to be able to influence them. You need to have a relationship. They need to know that you care about them if they're going to come to you or respect you. You certainly want to make sure that you're following the harassment policy to the T, as we previously mentioned. Then you're going to help also in monitoring the work environment. help us to resolve and eliminate all forms of harassment. And you're the eyes and ears of the organization. So what you see going on out there, help us to actively monitor, reinforce any violations. It's okay for you to resolve the smaller harassing items, such as swearing, inappropriate jokes, employee disagreements. Talk to them and resolve those on your own. Some of the more challenging things, like where an employee comes in and complains, or there's threats or unwanted touching, any of that kind of harassment, your role here is to gather the information and then take it to human resources and senior management, where they will then step in and help with a plan and such. We'll talk a little bit further about that in a moment. But you're key in helping with the reinforcement. Okay. Well, also you're going to help with the rumor control. So whenever these kinds of things take place, if you see others talking about it, or someone speaking negatively, or treating someone else differently, or retaliating against them, you're going to need to be on top of that and help be the eyes and ears and to eliminate those things. And lastly, I would say, do not date or pursue sexual relations with employees who report to you. Probably a good idea for anyone in the organization, period, for you and your role. If this does ever happen, bring it to the attention of senior management or human resources right away so that they're aware of it and can make other changes and adjustments so you don't have any of these kinds of problems coming into play. Okay? Well, there are legal implications. Where you represent the company, what you say and do can create a great place to work or can create risk and lawsuits for the company and yourself. So make sure you take all complaints seriously and obtain assistance when necessary. You are an agent of the organization. You might have times also where, as an agent, you need to tell the HR and others when you've received complaints, even when somebody perhaps doesn't want you to. Quite often you'll have someone come into your office and they'll say, I've got something I need to talk to you about, but I don't want anyone else to know. What you need to say in that case is, I will keep it on a need-to-know only basis, as confidential as possible. Most of the time from there, they're going to talk with you and such. If they're afraid still to speak with you, ask them about their concerns and try to help them understand that they really have nothing to worry about. If it's happening to them, it's probably happening to other people as well. We need to move forward in helping to eliminate it. All right, the cost of harassment is extensive. Increased absenteeism, decreased productivity, turnover, low morale, legal fees, financial settlements, and certainly the company's image. So it's so critical that we keep on top of these things as leaders in the organization and eliminate this. Well, how you respond, and we want you to respond and take serious all reports of harassment. They may not actually call it harassment. They might just say, Roger keeps asking me out, or I'm worried that Bill's going to punch me, or something like that. Whatever the complaint, find a private place to discuss it and encourage the employee to open up about what's going on. Ask good questions, such as who, what, when, where, how. Were there witnesses? And then your job is to listen and make notes and ask other probing questions. Just kind of gather information from that person only. So find a private, confidential area to talk, gather the facts, and then take the information then to human resources and senior management so that they will work together, perhaps with you and others, and kind of plan out an investigation if necessary, or what next steps to take. But it's not a good idea for you to try to conduct the investigation on your own or to take it further than that for these things that are of a serious nature. So again, make sure that you get the help that's needed with this. Okay? Well, thank you for participating in our training today. If you have further questions, please speak with your Human Resources Department or feel free to contact HR Service at 833-685-8400 extension 1 or solutions@hrserviceinc.com. Thank you.